In September of 2024, Officer Chris Powell of the St. Clair Shores Police Department notified the Wilmington Police Department that he had discovered information about a police officer who had died in the line of duty in 1936. Officer Adrian Darcy Newton passed away on July 18, 1936, of a heart attack following a foot pursuit. Officer Newton's line-of-duty death was unknown to the department prior to this notification. Research was conducted to verify that Officer Newton met the criteria for a line-of-duty death and was recently confirmed. On the evening of July 18, 1936, Officer Newton responded to a fight in Church's Alley, known at the time as Racket Store Alley. He arrested two men and began walking them to the call box on South Front Street. According to call box locations in 1912, the closest call box was listed at South Front and Orange Street. A police call box and a fire alarm box can be seen attached to the telephone pole. One of the arrestees began to flee on foot, with Officer Newton running behind him. Officer Newton tried to subdue the suspect by hitting him with his hickory club. Officer Newton was able to get the subject to the ground. He struggled with the suspect for a few minutes before the suspect gave up. When Officer Newton started to get up to secure the suspect tried to flee again. Officer Hughes arrived on scene and assisted with taking the suspect back into custody. The other suspect remained on the sidewalk while Officer Newton was in pursuit. While walking back to the call box at the corner, Officer Newton started staggering and was caught by Mr. M.B. Ward. He was then placed on a running board of a nearby vehicle. When he fell unconscious, Officer Newton was carried to another car, a visitor from Baltimore, Maryland. Officer Newton was then transported to James Walker Memorial Hospital. Sadly, he was pronounced dead upon arrival. An autopsy was not performed, but his cause of death was ruled as a heart attack due to overexertion. The suspect who fled was arrested for resisting arrest and assault. The decision to charge the suspect for Officer Newton's death was given to the grand jury. The grand jury found that there was not enough evidence to charge. He was later found guilty by Judge Alton Lennon of resisting arrest and paid a $25 fine. Officer Newton was interviewed for the North Carolina Police Review. He was born in Sampson County, North Carolina. He was 5'8" and weighed 215 pounds. Officer Newton loved hunting in the outdoors. He would always volunteer for search parties and could outrun smaller officers despite his larger stature. Officer Newton started his career at the Wilmington Police Department in 1911. During his interview with the 1925 North Carolina Police Review, he stressed the need for schools for policemen. He stated a large percentage of men who apply to agencies with police schools do not pass the qualifications. Without police schools, men are hired based on physique, not capabilities. Officer Newton stated that police officers should have a natural aptitude for mental alertness, decisiveness, aggressiveness, without being overbearing, broad-mindedness, and other numerous qualities. He believed that police schools would lead to higher pay, and police work would take a great stride forward. In 1955, a police school was offered at the Wilmington Police Department to current officers and detectives. North Carolina did not require police training until 1974. Officers were required to complete 168 hours of training for police certification. Prior to 1974, Wilmington police officers received 2 weeks of field training, which did not include firearms training. Today, WPD officers must complete 868 hours of training through North Carolina Basic Law Enforcement Training and complete 16 weeks of field training with the WPD Field Training Officer. Officer Newton was survived by his wife and 3 children, 2 sons and a daughter. His brother Charles Newton was also a WPD officer. He began his career in 1917. At the November 24 board meeting for the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, Officer Adrian Newton was approved and will be recognized for his sacrifices in Washington, D.C. on May 13, 2025. Officer Newton will be added to the National Law Enforcement Officer Memorial Wall in D.C. and the Wilmington Area Law Enforcement Memorial Wall in May of 2025. Officer Adrian Newton, found, never to be forgotten. Special thanks to Officer Chris Powell of the St. Clair Shores Police Department in Michigan. After losing his friend and fellow officer Colin Rose in the line of duty in November of 2016, he has worked to identify law enforcement officers who have not been added to the National Memorial in Washington, D.C. The preliminary information on Officer Newton was sent to our department and follow-up research was completed.